Hi guys. Today let's have a look at how we can utilize the Perfecto IDE, or Perfecto's native IDE, to create a maintenance script which we can just use frequently to ensure that our devices are at their freshest when they're supposed to be running heavy regression tests and so on. Right, you all know the devices are real devices that simply aren't built to be running 24/7, right? So depending on the device, some might require a daily reset, obviously also depending on the load that they're under. But in general, every now and then, every week or so, a device reset might be a good idea. Right, let's get at it. I'm in the automation tab, right? Really the only thing I want to do right now is to add an open and a close device to the script. There's the close, there's the open, right? And in between these two, we can add anything that's important for us to ensure that the device uh, currently has. So usually I would put a reboot device in there, right? And I might be able, I might want to do other things. I might want to clean up applications, right? But for now, this is sufficient. Actually, I'll also put in a home so that when we execute this whole test now, we don't have to wait for the devices to come back online, but we can simply verify that the test has worked with the home button. All right, so this is actually it. Right. One more thing that we can do is in the properties to untick the allocate devices automatically. Right. This simply achieves that when the test is started, so when run is clicked, the devices aren't allocated right away. So the connection to devices isn't established right away, but only at the moment of open device. Right. This can help us later because it means we can add logic to deal with the device not opening. Right. So if it doesn't open or didn't open, we could then, I don't know, add some smart weight, just deal with it. Yeah, this is actually all I want as a script for now. Fill, and we'll save it under plain reboot script in my public folder. Public folder means that everybody can execute it and also work with it in general. All right. So right now, if I execute this, we can only execute it on one device under test. Right. What we really want is to have another test, another script, which calls this original test. Right. So that we can actually call this test not just once, but several times, ideally in parallel, against a number of devices. Okay. So this is our reboot script. Right. If I now execute it, it will be running with the device that we set under variables. Okay. So now what we wanted to do is to kind of create a test which we can execute across a number of devices in parallel. Right? Because if I have 10, 20, 50, 100 devices, I might not want to wait for each of them to finish and not trigger them individually. So what we can do is go into the repository, go into the data table, create a new data table, right, and add a column to it. I don't know, let's call it devices. So essentially we create a table and fill that with all the devices that we want our script to run over. Usually I also add a description column because I might want to have the ability to later describe the devices that we add so that we can add some additional logic. We might only want to iterate over the devices that have descriptor set to urgent or descriptor set to before every regression. Right, so it's just an option that we give ourselves. All right, so let's see which devices are close to me. The iPhone 8, for example, and there's some Galaxy S8. So let's add them to the data table and save the data table. I'm saving it under devices EU. So if I now go back to automation, I can actually reference this data table in my variables. Right, so I simply change DUT to not be a variable or a constant, but to get its information from the data table that we just created. Right. Now we need our test to kind of call the script with one after another the different data pulled from the rows of the data table. Right. So we want this to be executed once as an iPhone 8 and once passing as a parameter the Samsung Galaxy. So what we need to do is add a loop. Right. What this loop will do, it will iterate over the data table, right, and iterate over the devices that we have in there and provide a DUT variable so that we can now tell our our script, which will reboot the device, that instead of using the variable, we should get it from the data table, right? And the data table that we just defined, which is now under the variable DUT as well, and that we want to iterate over the devices column that we created. And that is almost it. There's two more important things to this. Number one, right now this test will run synchronously, right? So it will start running this on the iPhone. If there's a lot of things to be done, like a reboot, which takes a little bit of time for the device to restart and so on, we really don't want to wait for it to finish, right? We want to trigger these tests and have them run in parallel. So for this, we can just double click onto the test, onto the script call actually, go into the advanced parameters and change this from embedded to asynchronously, right? Which means that the test now just will go in and trigger the test and move on. So it's really just therefore calling this individual plain reboot. Here, very important, we really want to set the script properties to not allocate the device, because otherwise at the beginning of the test when we click run, all of the devices that we have in our data table will be allocated one after another. So number one, this takes unnecessary time. And number two, again, it takes away the control from the individual script, because if any of these tests fails, right, we don't have any control over how it's being handled. Whereas right now, the opening happens inside the plain reboot script. So if one of the devices is currently down, it's not connected because we swapped it out, right, then one of these scripts will fail and not the entire thing. All right, so let's quickly save this one as reboot EU, right, because we want to reboot the European devices, two of them. So if you now click run, this script will complete successfully right away, because it really just triggers the test and finishes. So it has no idea about whether this passed or failed. This is what we look into the script later and to the report. Okay. So I've just gone into the dashboard to see whether the devices are opened. Let's see. So they both were. The iPhone already closed again. The iPhone and the Samsung Galaxy S8 will also close momentarily. So when we go over into the report that the test just offered us to be opened, we should already see one of them passed. This is the iPhone. And the Samsung Galaxy test is still taking a little bit longer. Remember, we just substituted the reboot function for a home button click, so that this should be pretty quick. And here we go. The second one is also finished, right? So now if any of these tests had failed, right, we could go into the actual script and see what happened, right? So in case you're doing something more with a bit more logic, like going into the settings and reading specific, like the Apple ID, which should be set, right, or setting it just in case it wasn't, the actual logic, we can verify that everything we were trying to do actually was done. So once we have our script running, right, there's one more thing to do, which is set something up to execute this test, this small test suite, which should be iterating over all the relevant devices, daily, weekly, depending on how we see the need for it. Now we can do that either by triggering this test from our continuous integration server, right? So we might want to set up a Jenkins job and schedule it to run during specific times, or if we don't have that, to not having to run this locally and kind of go in every day and trigger this, we can set up a Perfecto scheduler. Right, for that, we go into the execution center, use the scheduler up there, right? Just add a new schedule for we'll give the name maintenance, and we point it to a script, right? In that case, we created the script and called it reboot Europe, right? So that's it. We could here theoretically run the same script with different devices under test, right? With different data tables. So we could have different schedules, maybe trigger the ones that are the most problematic devices or the oldest on a daily basis, and others maybe once a week, right? So we could have different data tables for this and feed the same script with these different parameters, right? Once we set this up, we just need to set how often we want this to reoccur. So I, for example, would like to have this run daily at 23:10, right, which is just the end of my day. Right, and I could then set until when I want this to recur, or to just be a never-ending story. All right, and there we go. That's it, guys. We have a maintenance script, which essentially is a test suite that iterates over all the devices that we tell it to iterate over within the data table. And it is now running on a daily basis forever. Enjoy. Thank you.